name is Marty Zients. I'll be your host today for another edition of Project Freedom United. I'm joined with attorney Peter Ticktin, who's an author as well as a prominent attorney, and we'll be talking about issues that he is well familiar with in the area of politics. So my first question, Peter, would be, tell me about your time with Donald Trump, because everybody wants to know, since you're an old friend, you've known him since he was a teenager. Tell me about Donald Trump then.
Well, Donald and I have known each other since we were 15. Got to know each other really well in our senior year because he was my captain of Company A, and he made me his platoon sergeant of the 1st Platoon, and I basically ran his company for him. So I joke with people, I tell them I ran his first company for him, Company A.
Company A.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, at that time I had to take on the role of, drill sergeant to you name it, to make sure, we were in a military academy. So it wasn't like going to school where you have a pal at school, but it was more like, I suppose you could even say it's more like a reform school, because you don't leave there. You show up in September when you're supposed to be there, the beginning of September, and you go home for Thanksgiving for 5 days, for 9 days at Christmas, and 7 days at Easter, which we called Christmas and Easter, by the way, at that time. There was no such thing as spring break. Nobody knew what that even would mean necessarily. The lexicon changes over time. And other than that, you were there. You didn't go home for weekends, and you didn't decide that I'm going to go out to dinner tonight at this restaurant in town. I mean, you ate in the mess hall, and you lived in the barracks. And every day of the week, except Sundays, there were inspections, and Saturdays there were white glove inspections. So that would be when the senior staff officers come and to inspect, and they're wearing white gloves. So what do they do with these white gloves? Well, they feel around the casing around the door, and we had lockers which contained our clothing and our other items such as toothpaste, toothbrush, in which case there's different shelves, and so your roommate's toothbrush is directly under your toothbrush, and so on and so forth. And everything had to be absolutely spick and span. God help you if he feels over your locker and there's dust on his gloves. Never happened. Every single inspection that we had, we passed. Yes. And so that's an element of time and over time making sure I performed. And Donald Trump was a different kind of captain. Most of the captains of the different companies they were always senior in their senior year. They would kind of rule with a little bit of fear. They would do things that weren't necessarily were not acceptable, but they would do things. While standing in formation, they could go up to a cadet and knee them in a place which is a bad place to knee somebody. And they're stuck there holding their rifle, and there's nothing they can do. And so it develops a certain element of fear. But the way Donald Trump ran his company was completely different than that. You didn't fear him. Nobody feared Donald Trump. At the same time, you didn't want to disappoint him because he was such a good guy. I mean, he's the kind of guy. So every day, except Sundays, and we had mail call, and it was the captain of the company that would basically, at least in Donald's company, where he would call out the name and give the letter or give the package, and he always knew who it was that didn't get a letter for 3 weeks, because not every cadet's parents were good parents, or sometimes maybe they weren't even alive. But he knew who needed what, in terms of being able to keep their heads up. And he would just say the right words, you know, the right little joke or the right little gesture, and it would just take the tension out, because we all knew that Bill over there just really didn't get anything while everybody else around him was getting packages or from home or whatever. And you know, the things that make Donald Trump what Donald Trump is today were there when we were 17 together in our senior year of high school. Just a good guy, just a really good human being.
He cared about his fellow cadets.
Yeah, I mean, we caught a thief one time. Now, we lived by an honor code. Okay, which was that a cadet shall never lie, cheat, or steal from another cadet. That was the code. It didn't say you couldn't steal wax when you needed it for government inspection from the administration building, you know, but not from another cadet.
Okay.
And we all lived by that. We didn't have to repeat it every day to ourselves. It was just the way we all were. And, you know, sometimes I think about the way we tie our knots on our ties. Okay, you'll notice that he always ties a double Windsor knot. That's the way we were trained. And just as sure as he always ties a double Windsor knot, I can tell you that he still has that in him, you know, in terms of his honesty, his decency, especially his concern regarding other people. So I caught this fellow stealing a lighter. He was in a room he shouldn't have been in, and I happened to be walking down the hall. I see this fellow in a room that's not his, and I watch as he basically pockets a cigarette lighter from a cadet that wasn't there. And I brought him to Donald. Donald lets me call him Donald still. Okay, I don't in front of others, but
okay.
Because I have to, but I greatly respect his position. To me, he's my president. Okay, and not the imposter that's in the White House at this point. And Donald took it another step further. He had him empty his pockets, and sure enough, another cadet had been missing some single dollars that had been taken out of his wallet that this perfume had spilled in. So those $3 that this guy had in his pocket, they had the smell of the same perfume of the other guy's wallet. So we got him on stealing that stuff. So he was immediately expelled, but needed to spend the night. The next day he would be gone. And Donald had made it a real important point. Nothing is to happen to this guy, because cadets can sometimes take things upon themselves. You know, he breached the honor code. And
right.
That's a pretty serious thing. And so nothing happened to that fellow. But mainly, I don't know that anything would have, but it was never going to happen with Donald Trump around, because that was not the way to do things.
Speaks a lot to his character.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that he was usually or almost all the time a wonderful person. He was always a wonderful person. You know, they say you don't know somebody until you live with them. I lived with him, and I can tell you that's the way he was. You know, even now he kind of got annoyed at me about something. I wanted to do something, and I dared to argue with him, and he didn't shout back or whatever. He just said, "Peter, we're not going to da da da," and that was it. that was the end of that discussion.
The last word.
Oh, absolutely, but calm and cool, and that's the, you know, it's kind of like, you know, Harry Truman said, I never give anyone hell. I just tell them the truth, and they think that it's hell. And to a great extent, that's the way Donald Trump is. You know, he just states what he needs to say, and he doesn't need to become apoplectic to get his points across.
And the man you know today is the same man that you went to military school with.
Oh, he is the same man. And it's funny because I see him in a different way. I know I see him differently than anybody else because I still see anyone who's a parent who has adult children, yeah, they see them as the adult, but they also see them as the child. And so I have a way of seeing Donald that is totally consistent with the way he was when he was young.
That's so interesting that you can look at him from that perspective, while the rest of the world judges him based on what they hear the news media say.
Oh God, yes. I can go on about the news media.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, he calls them the enemy of the people, and they are, because we live in two different matrices. Okay, I mean, like there are people who've criticized Judge Middlebrooks because of the way he dismissed our case against Hillary Clinton. I was the one that filed that complaint. We worked really hard with Alina Habba's firm, and I was the local counsel. I was the lead local counsel, although she was, of course, the lead counsel over us. But it was filed under my name, and ultimately Judge Middlebrooks dismissed the case, thinking it was a whole bunch of nonsense, a whole bunch of lies, that it was all a political effort. And I know other lawyers have criticized Judge Middlebrooks, saying that he was dishonest and that he was biased and so on, But I've been before Judge Middlebrooks on other cases, and I know who this man is to a certain extent, and I just don't believe it. This is an honest man. This is a man, I think, that loved the law as a practitioner and ultimately as a judge. And he is honest as far as he is concerned, and he's honest, he's bold, he does the right things. But when it came to the Hillary Clinton case, because he watches the media, because you got to rely on these people. Walter Cronkite, who's going to think that he's going to be lying to the American people?
No one.
And when you're watching whoever it is that's on NBC News or CBS News, you're getting the full story, or you think that you are. And that's the reason that they're the enemy of the people, because they're using their positions, or whoever's writing what they need to write, and whoever owns them now is putting in real news, maybe 40% of it, maybe 80% of it, who knows. Somebody gets shot in your neighborhood, they're the ones telling you who got shot, and there's a school shooting, and this is what happened with this, and this is what happened with that. A plane crashes, this is what's happening with that. But when it comes to political issues, they twist it and they bend it, and what we have is a mixture between news and propaganda. And it's the propaganda that caused Judge Middlebrooks to believe that Hillary Clinton could never make this Steele dossier. She wouldn't have paid millions of dollars for a Steele dossier, and he knows for a fact that it could never happen. But what he knows is what's consistent with the matrix of where he gets his information.
That's right.
So, to him, he's not biased. To him, he's just seeing what we're presenting as a bunch of nonsense. But he's not putting two and two together to come out with four. He's ignoring the numbers, because that dossier didn't create itself. And we have a trail where we can prove our case. In fact, much of the information we got from the Durham investigation. And that's all credible information, but not believable when you're inundated with information from the media.
Well, the media is driven by profit and market share, and their motives are not pure. If I believe Walter Cronkite, when he said something, he was really reporting the news without bias. Today, I don't feel that way.
young, a bit younger than I am now, when Richard Nixon was in office, I was in Canada, and I watched the news there, and I watched as American planes were dumping more TNT on Hanoi and North Vietnam than we dropped in the Second World War. And every day on the news, it's showing these planes going over and dropping all these bombs and dropping all these bombs. And that's what the U.S. was doing at the time. I came down to Florida to visit my family, and my uncle, who I never had a crossword with in my entire life, I just loved the man. And I mentioned this to him, and he got so upset with me because it wasn't happening. I was making up a lie, and he just, he reacted to it because I didn't realize it, but it wasn't in the American news, even back then.
Wow.
And, well, that's why Ellsberg got in so much trouble, okay? That's why, he was revealing things that shouldn't have been revealed at the time. So the news, even back then, was doing what the government wanted them to do to a great extent. But now we've got a different situation entirely. Now we have a takeover by the far left, which is, I don't even know if it's the far left or the crazy. I don't know what to call it anymore. Because who would have ever thought that it would be government policy of a president of the United States to let in whoever wants to come into the United States through the southern border? I mean, just taking that as an example. Okay, I mean, we see so much crazy stuff going on. I mean, 30 by 30. Do you know about 30 by 30?
No, I don't. Please enlighten me.
I understand that Biden signed an executive order his first day in office to basically align with 30 by 30. I understand every country in the world has signed up with 30 by 30 policy. And what it is to not take, but buy, or take, depending on what country it would be, I suppose, but in the United States, would buy up 30% of all the farmland in the United States and turn it into wild land. Let it just grow. Let it return to nature. Do not allow people on it don't allow grazing on it, don't allow hunting on it, don't allow people on it, period. Well, I mean, if we reduce our farmland by 30%, I would think, let me think for a second now, what would that do? Oh, maybe it would reduce our amount of food by about 30%.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, well, So, what is this about? What's going on? Why in the world would this be? And the idea is that it's to lower the amount of nitrogen. Well, I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's not like we have a great surplus of food now. We have millions of people that starve to death every year. Not that many, but there is a certain element. There is that fringe.
Yeah.
And I don't know what will happen when this becomes reality. But my understanding is that land is being bought up. When it comes to whatever beliefs a person has in terms of anything beyond the physical, if a person believes in the Lord, well, then that's a wonderful thing. That the person, we should all have our beliefs in what we choose to believe. But when it comes to facts, there's an expression, there's a saying that belief is the enemy of knowledge. So, because facts are either proved or disproved, facts are ascertained. My background is in science. After New York Military Academy, I went to school in London, Ontario. I skipped my first year of college. I skipped my last year of college. I was in medical school when I was 20 years old, and which was an accomplishment, but I really didn't want to be a doctor. I just needed to get into medical school because that was what my parents wanted, My background being in science, facts are proved or disproved, and if you just believe in it, then you stop everything. Like, for instance, one of the things I've done was I was the one responsible to harvest or to marshal, I should say, evidence regarding January 6th.
Okay.
Okay. And I did that for 9 months. It was like drinking from a fire hose. Okay, because once people knew where to send their videos, it was coming to me. People have no idea about January 6th. In terms of facts, I don't know. So I know about January 6th. I know about things where I've seen evidence. I know about the election fraud because I've seen evidence that other people don't see. But to most people, they tend to either believe or disbelieve.
Right.
They don't get to see the facts. I have seen videos of government employees in what some people like to call the deep state, who are very influential people in the government, where they were meeting, this is members of the left, with one infiltrator that shot the video of the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
And they were planning to basically take over, go into certain government buildings, including the Capitol on January 6th, half a year before the election. That's when January 6th was planned. Okay.
That's a revelation.
This is going to start showing up in some other ways soon. The whole shooting of Ashley Babbitt is a mystery to me. I watched it over and over again. You got a gun shooting horizontal, but the bullet went up. You have Ashley Babbitt, who was supposedly killed and laying on the floor in that alcove that she was in, and at the same time you got two guys that were dressed up as SWAT police, and they're changing their clothes into look like Trump supporters, all shot by a guy named Sullivan, who did no time for being in the Capitol. That's a strange one. They try to say that Donald Trump incited people. These was peaceful crowd. People were praying. People were singing the national anthem. I saw videos of the people who were there basically very peacefully, and then all of a sudden the Metropolitan Police, not the Capitol Police, but the Metropolitan Police started firing percussion grenades among those people, getting them very upset and riled up. I saw the female police officer using a stick and beating and beating and beating and beating and beating and beating, and I could go on and on because it just kept going on and on. It was horrifying. Roseanne Boylan to death. The only people that died were Trump supporters. No police officers died. We keep hearing 5 police officers died. It's not true. That's just a fiction. I mean, there's one fellow that died the next day of had a heart problem, but and there are other people that coincidentally died later, but nobody died there, and nobody died because of any violence like that. I mean, the fellow that they said died because his head was bashed with a fire extinguisher. That's the one that died the next day of natural causes.
I'd like to ask you, a lot of conservatives in the country, a lot of people that are in militias around the country, a lot of conservatives, they're thinking that we need bullets and guns to take back our country. And you made the statement to me before we went on air that's not going to work, that couldn't work. I'd like to hear your take on what we need to do instead of revolting, which obviously is not the preferred method of taking back our country. What do you see as the only way for us to right the ship, to take it back?
I just want to comment on the first point, and then I answer your question.
Okay. Sure.
We're outgunned. Anyone who picks up a gun now and starts shooting soldiers, I mean, what are you going to do? Shoot innocent soldiers, innocent police officers? I mean, who are you going to shoot? It reminds me of a poster. I remember when I was in college. There was we had a lot of posters. People would buy these posters and they would say something funny on the bottom. And this one, I'm so sorry I didn't buy it and keep it, because it was a barnyard filled with thousands of geese, a huge barnyard and filled with geese, and every goose was looking directly at the camera. Somebody must have shot off a gun or caused something to cause every goose to turn and look right at the camera. And the picture was shot, and underneath it said, "Now that we're organized, what are we going to do?"
Okay.
Okay? We are those geese. There's no way for us to avoid the slaughter, no matter how much we think we might be able to, if it turns to that, okay? If the militias around the United States start getting activated and start firing their guns and killing people, that's going to cause the armed forces to take over, and it's just it's not going to be, and it's not going to end well. I'm not saying people shouldn't be armed. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be able to protect themselves should the worst come. But we're not there yet, and we certainly should not be thinking that time is necessarily that soon, because it will just cause an exacerbation of the circumstances we're under now. When and where we need to go, I'll tell you next, but I just want to, I remember when I was a kid, okay? Now, Donald Trump and I, we were both born within a year of the end of World War II, and it was a different world then. We were in cars, and all of a sudden there's an air raid siren going, and we knew exactly what to do as little children. We had to get under the dashboard and get on the floors, and the adults would put themselves over us, and it wasn't like 90% of the people would be following these rules and doing what they should do and pulling over. 100% of the people would pull over and do exactly what they had to do. In schools, we had to get on our desk knowing not to face the windows because the glass would go through our eyes even if they were closed. We knew that we needed to take those positions and be under our desks and so on. And it wasn't one teacher that ever would say, "No, I'm not going to do that exercise." Everyone did it. We were homogenous. We were just one nation and doing one thing we had to do. That's what wartime is about. So well, at that point in time, okay, in my childhood, after the war, even while these air sirens were still going and so on, people were changing, and they were socializing, and there were no longer rations, and people were starting to have parties, but the parties were different than they were when I was a teenager. It wasn't a party where people would drink and dance and have music playing. It was a party that you wouldn't even think of it as a party. The women would all go into one place, probably the kitchen. I don't know, because I didn't go with the women. But the men would all go into the living room or into a room, and they would all have these discussions. And I don't remember, I don't know why, but for some reason there was one time that this discussion was taking place. My father was a physician, and he had intelligent friends. And so there was this intellectual discussion about Germany. What went wrong in Germany? What's the one thing that went wrong in Germany that caused all of this to happen? And I remember they came to a conclusion, which is amazing when you think about it, for such a question to be answered. But they all came to a conclusion that this is the reason, this is what happened, and it was that there were criminals that took over the government. That was the solution that all these wise men came to. That's what changed everything.
And that's what's happening here now. Slowly but surely.
Not slowly but surely. We have a man who obviously is on the take, who's a criminal, There's no question about, you know, his son. So you know, there's no question about, to me, about the fixed election. I mean, just looking at it, just a few things. Forget the analysis of the Dominion machines or anything else, okay? Because there's so many different ways that that thing is being played. So let's just look at what is undeniable. We know that no state in the history of the nation has ever stopped the count. Yet we have 4 states that night, supposedly without communicating to each other, they all had the need at the same time
To stop the count.
to stop the count. And then they all switched from Donald Trump being in the lead to Joe Biden being in the lead, the swing states. We saw things that are undeniable. I know they're being denied, but they're not being denied in a way that makes anybody who has eyes and their own mind to believe it.
Sure.
You know, the camera on the top of the counting room in Fulton County, you know, caught people. They emptied the place with a lie that there was a water main that broke. There was no water main that broke. They had 4 people that stayed in the room, and this is all on camera. This is all videoed. These people then, the tables all had aprons around them, so you couldn't see what was underneath the tables. They go underneath the tables. They pull out suitcases filled with ballots, and then they start putting them through the machines over and over and over again. Okay, I mean, you see this with our own eyes.
So now that we know that all took place, and
Yeah.
what are we going to do to get back on track here? Short of, is there anything other than Trump winning the election in 2024?
Well, the point is, I got into the election because that was all criminal activity.
Okay.
So the criminals have taken over. Okay, whoever they are. Okay, I mean, Joe Biden wasn't doing this stuff. This is all being done for him by people that now control what's going on. So we're in a lot of trouble. And the thing is that most people just have no clue, because things haven't changed in a way that's really affecting their lives. Okay, because that's what happens. This is the way these horrible changes occur. But when that change comes, it's going to come fast. And we don't know when it's coming. I just pray that it's after the election. Because that election in 2024, the election, is our last chance to really get our country back again. There's a lot of people that know about what I'm speaking, whose eyes are open, who are very, very, very concerned about America. Because this is it, okay? Canada's already gone. You're not allowed to, criticize the Prime Minister. Look at Jordan Peterson, look what happened to him, where he criticized Trudeau, and the next thing his licenses to practice psychology is threatened. Now Canada's pretty well gone. Australia's gone. Europe's a mess.
So we're the last bastion after this.
This is it.
Nowhere to go.
This is it. There's no place to run. And that's why a lot of people get that idea that maybe they need to be able to take up arms, but there's against who?
Yeah, who's going to fire the first shot?
Yeah. I mean, it's not as though we now can take the south half of the country and fight the north half of the country and have a geographical divide. How would this civil war take place?
Yeah.
It's a myth.
And then we have to worry about what happens 4 years later when Donald Trump leaves office.
No, we don't need to worry about that. No. By that, Donald Trump understands and knows exactly that he needs to fix this thing in those 4 years. It's one thing to get it back on track and to root out these forces of evil, and it's another thing to maintain it afterward. Okay, so no, right now, the only thing that we need to worry about is getting Donald Trump reelected. There's nobody else that can do what he can do.
So in this case, I'd like to thank Peter for being my guest today on Project Freedom United. And I want to make a special mention of someone who's worked very hard behind the scenes to make all of this possible, and that's Gene Peachy. I'd like to give him a credit for organizing this, putting it all together, and really an unsung hero in our production. So thank you, Gene, for all your efforts on our behalf. And I'm Marty Zients, and this is another episode or another edition of Project Freedom United. Join us again soon.